Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome back to the last week of online learning. This is going to be the last time in this school year that we're going to be creating videos for you to consolidate your learning and practice and get ready for second grade. So this week we're going to be working with fractions in math. And today we're going to be talking about halves or a half. And does any of my teachers, do you know what a half is, or can we explain it? What is a half or halves? Ms. Rosales?
Well, I'm thinking about a whole object like a circle, and a half would be two parts, cutting a circle into two equal parts.
Perfect. So I wrote halves here because half is a singular. If you're talking about one half, that's the singular word for it. And then we have the plural word, which is halves. So if you have two halves, you would say halves, not two half, right? So like Ms. Rosales said, halves are when you have two equal partitions or equal parts. And Ms. Hernandez, you want to add on to our thinking? Go ahead.
Sure. When I'm thinking of half, I'm also thinking of quantity. So like, for example, when I make a bag of popcorn, I could easily eat half of the bag, but then there would be the other half of the popcorn left in the bag for someone else, like either my husband or my daughter can eat the other half.
Perfect. Yeah, that's another way we think of halves. We can think of like something cut, like Ms. Rosales showed us in her circle. Can you show us again, Mr. Rosales? So that's a half where we have a shape and it's cut equally into halves, two parts. Or we can talk about it in quantity, like Ms. Hernandez said. When we have, say, a smoothie, we can either drink half of it, or if we have a piece of cake, we can eat half of it, or cookie. So right now, teachers and friends at home, I want you to think about how can you show a half, maybe a visual representation of halves. What would be a half that you would like to show or that you know about from prior knowledge? And take a minute and remember, friends at home, you can pause the video to give yourself more working time, more thinking time, and use a paper at home and take a picture of it when we're done and upload it to Seesaw so we can see the amazing work that you do. Teachers, when you have an idea, just give me a thumbs up so that we can share our thinking with our friends at home. Ms. Rosales, you are first. What is your visual representation of a half?
So I'm going to stick to the idea of one whole item. And one of my favorite sports is baseball. So I drew a baseball bat. And I had to remember that I have to create two equal parts to create two halves. And in order to do that, I have to have my line of symmetry. Boys and girls, a line of symmetry is when you have a line that cuts an item or a whole into two equal parts. But the tricky part is that you have to remember it has to go down the middle. So here you can see my line of symmetry, and my left side and my right side are the same. At least I tried.
And I did too. And I recreated it here so that you can see a bigger picture if you couldn't see Ms. Rosales' beautiful drawing. So she drew a baseball bat and then the line of symmetry right down the middle, cutting it in two equal pieces. So we have, if we were to fold it at that line of symmetry, if we were to fold this object, we would know that this part of the baseball bat is the same as the other side of the baseball bat. So kind of like when we're folding a piece of paper, we want to make sure that both halves are equal, right? They're touching and they have the same space between them. So the line of symmetry is the middle of our object where the object is cut perfectly into a half or two pieces. All right, does anyone else have can show us what half looks like, or halves? Miss Hernandez, can you show us what your halves look like?
Sure. So again, I'm thinking of quantity. I'm having a half a glass of water, but I'm also having a line in the middle, kind of like Ms. Rosales did. It would be considered the line of symmetry. It's showing exactly where half of the glass is. The bottom half is where the water would be filled. The upper half is, of course, the empty space.
Hard for me to draw that half line, but right here, Ms. Hernandez showed a half a glass. And here is the half mark, right? That line of symmetry. And we can not only cut a line of symmetry or use a line of symmetry down the middle, we can use it on the side, right? Going either vertical or horizontal, as long as both of the pieces, this piece here and this piece here, are equal. And that's the important part. Both parts have to be equal. So I'm going to write that there so that you guys know that halves, they have to be the same size. So both partitions or parts have to be equal. Partitions must be equal. And we talked about equal when we talked about shapes, and that was why it was a perfect segue into fractions. Miss T, do you have a visual representation of what half looks like to you?
Yeah, so I thought of a pizza, and I thought of a pizza because we were doing shapes on triangles, so I drew my triangle first, and then I was like, ooh, that kind of looks like a pizza. So I drew half a slice of pizza, and just like you said, both partitions have to be equal, so I try to do it with as equal as I could, right down the middle.
Perfect. And I love the detail of your pepperoni, and I'm going to use black to show that line of symmetry. So we had her beautiful piece of pizza, and sometimes it's just too much for us and we want to cut it down the middle. Or if we have only one piece of pizza and we want to share it with our brother or sister, we need to cut it into a smaller piece, right? And I do that a lot when I want maybe a third piece of pizza, but the piece of pizza looks too big and I want to make it smaller. So the line of symmetry is right down the middle, and both pieces are equal. All right, now I want us to think about not just one object, but I want us to think about a set. So when we have maybe a set of something and only half of them are there and that other half are missing. So what would that look like? Ms. Rosales, can you share your thinking with us?
Sure. So I have 4 hearts.
Ooh.
And half of them are black and the other half are white. Or we can say 2 of them are shaded and 2 of them are not.
So I'm going to color them in.
And if you're wondering, you can see the line of symmetry there.
That was a great visual representation. So we have a set of hearts, but only 2 are colored in and the other 2 are white still. So we can write this into a fraction and we can say half of the hearts, half of our hearts are colored or shaded in, right? And then the other half are white. And so how we write half is just like this, 1/2. And does anyone know why we write 1/2 to show half in a numerical way? Ms. Rosales, can you give us more information about this?
Sure. When we're thinking about 1/2, we're talking about 2 things here. We look at the bottom number, which is the denominator. It lets us know how many we have in all. So let's just say I'm looking at my hearts. I have 2 hearts. Of the 2 hearts, one of them is shaded. So this is a set of 2 and one of them is shaded. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute. There are 4 hearts there. Why is it not 4 hearts? Think about it this way. Miss Rosales had 4 hearts. I apologize, I ran out of room. Yes, this is shaded. No, it's not shaded. Yes, this is shaded. No, it's not shaded. And all I did was move this one over and change this one over. And now I have this new picture. It's the same thing. Out of 2, one of them is shaded, one of them is not. Out of 2, one of them is shaded, one of them is not. And all I did was move them over. Now we have that picture.
Thank you for explaining that. Because another way we could write this would be 2 out of the 4 hearts are shaded, right? And that's the same thing. And that's something that you are going to learn more about as you go into third grade, as you go into second grade and fourth grade. And so we just gave you a little bit of a sneak peek. Yes, Ms. Hernandez, how would you show half of a set?
Well, before I get into that, I was looking at what Miss Rosales had drawn, and I saw it a different way. Okay. I saw it as two groups, one group that was colored and another group that was not colored. So out of two groups, there was only one half of the group that was colored.
Ooh, I can see that. So the 2 over here represents the number of groups. Right. So we have 1 and 2 groups. And so the denominator shows us those 2 groups, and only one group is the one that's colored in or shaded in. So we have a denominator which shows us how many groups, and then our numerator which shows us how many of the groups are colored or shaded in, right? So this is a numerator. Whenever you see, sorry, that's not gonna fit. I'll put it down here. Whenever the number on top is called a numerator, that's the vocabulary that we use when talking about fractions. So we have a numerator on the top and then the denominator on the bottom. All right, so are there any other ways that we can show half or halves of something? Ms. Hernandez, please share your ideas with us.
So now I'm thinking of a set like you were mentioning. And so I was thinking of the collection of eggs that we were talking about not too long ago. So in this case, we know that a dozen is 12 eggs. And in my egg carton, only half of that carton is filled with eggs. So I'm looking at, I made my line of symmetry as best as I could. There are 2 groups of eggs, one at the top and one at the bottom. Okay. So in this case, it's only half filled. The dozen of eggs is only half filled.
Perfect. And I know I'm taking a little bit of time trying to draw this as best as I can. And then I'm going to show that line of symmetry that Ms. Hernandez created. So she has 6 eggs on the top that are not shaded in, and then 6 eggs in the bottom that are shaded in. And then she drew her line of symmetry right here to show that the row on the top is the same number as the row on the bottom. So we have 12 or a dozen eggs. So if we have a dozen, so this is half of the set, right? We have a whole set, but only half of them are shaded in. So one group, we have 2 groups, the shaded group and the unshaded group. And how many are shaded in? Yes, Ms. Rosales.
Oh, that was one. I wanted to draw a connection to what I mentioned earlier. So if we're looking at it vertically, one is not filled, the other one is shaded. Not shaded, shaded, not shaded, shaded, up, down, up, down, up, down. So if you look at her egg carton, not shaded, and the bottom one is shaded.
Not shaded, shaded, not shaded, shaded, right. So we have one out of these groups. We can look at it 2 ways. We have 2 groups, or we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups. And of those 6 groups, 1 egg is shaded and the other one is not, but there are 2 altogether, right? So yeah, you can look at it in different ways. So here we're talking about halves, and remember, when you talk about halves, you need to make sure that when you partition or cut something in half, they both have to be equal parts, and they should have a line of symmetry. That was our number talk for today. Tomorrow we're going to get into a new vocabulary word, thinking about halves or fractions. We're going to start talking about fourths. And so that's something new to think about. If you know anything about fourths, start thinking about it now and sharing or drawing any of your visual representations of fourths. And we'll see you in a bit. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Don't forget to subscribe.